Hey, yo, it is March the 3rd, 2020, 2024. And I want to apologize straight away if you hear this damn parrot over in the living room. He's getting overly excited. He's toning it down. He might not interrupt. But there is a parrot in the living room. He's making odd sounds at me. Back on YouTube, last night, shout out to all the people who came through. I saw that there was like a dozen views on YouTube when I had like 4 thumbs up. All right. And it reminds me that, there's people here on YouTube. Sometimes I'll be surprised who are just waiting for me to like come on YouTube and do my thing on here. The Lord knows, of course, I have my beef with people who run YouTube and this and that. They're always like deleting my videos or banning me for a week and stuff. It's very frustrating. I don't like that. I don't like that aspect. But shout out to all the other people who came through and gave me that thumbs up for last night. It causes me to think that because I do want to get into live streaming. I mean, it's various reasons. And actually, I think I'm understanding that my capabilities here, live streaming as far as articles and this and that, I'm going to have to figure it out because of the logistics. You may, in fact, need a laptop set up in order to do these articles and this and that. I don't know. We're gonna find out. But in the meantime, I think it's a really good idea. To stay regular. That way people know that I'm around in case they want to hear all my tomfoolery, right? Whatever malarkey I got coming out. Maybe they want to hear that, right? It's a good idea to be regular that way. So I think since it's so easy, it says people already know me here on YouTube. Perhaps I'll like 4 times a week, and we're gonna see how it goes. You know how plans don't always turn out how you want, but we're gonna see if maybe like 3, 4 times a week get it in here on YouTube, and then once or twice a week get it on Rumble, and of course on Rumble we're gonna go way harder, right? So I mean, please understand that's what's Rumble. That when you go to Rumble, that's what that's about. To go hard in the paint. There's a lot of things that I just can't even say. Last night on the YouTube stream, if they find out some of the things that I was saying on the stream, the robot's gonna cancel me, man. The robot's gonna delete my video, stuff like that. So today, I thought I would jump on a live stream. I don't want to do it later because I actually had to go and do some work, get some money. In fact, we're gonna talk about that money before we get up out of here. But I have to get some work, get some of that money today, and then tomorrow I plan to be up early and at the job site getting more money. All right. And so I want to go from one job site, come back to the crib, get wound down, go to sleep fast as I can, and get as much sleep as I can before tomorrow early when I gotta make some more money and perform. So there won't be no time this evening as far as live streaming. That's what I figured. I figured, I might as well get it in right now in the middle of the day. Here in Texas, Central Standard Time, it is 2:41 p.m. Right in the middle of the day, right? And then, of course, people could come through afterwards if they wanted to see it. And if they were interested in the topics that I put forth, and that is what we're going to talk about. Tip culture. And I've been meaning to talk about this for a long time. I haven't talked about it yet because I haven't been live streaming, right? But I've been thinking of this and mulling over it a while now. Tip culture, and shout out to Exiled Lioness here on YouTube. The reason why I even got to thinking about tip culture is because she happened to bring it up, and one night, it's maybe like a couple of weeks ago, her and her people they were talking about tip culture and like you go around the world and it's not they don't tip around the world. Most places don't tip at all, right? But in America and certain places in the West, apparently it somehow came into fashion the whole tip culture. It became so normalized that nobody even questions the fact is, yeah, there's a tip culture here. People trying to get tips. All right. And so what they were talking about, and I don't know exactly what's the conclusion they came to that night, but they were talking about the efficacy of tip culture. We want to talk about that right now, or like here in a second. And but I think the conclusion they were getting to is that it's not efficacious or whatever's the word. It's not a good idea to implement tip culture anywhere. Right? It could prove to perhaps be negative, a negative force, and therefore destructive. And I mulled over it for quite some time. I mulled over it. It was plenty of food for thought, what they were saying. And as I alluded to earlier, I had to go here later today to a job. And in that job, I personally get tips. And I just want you to know that. So it's coming from like somewhat of an unbiased, I guess, or perhaps biased perspective, because I personally have a job where I get tips. Part of that tip culture, all right? But I did the math and I mulled over it. And I think I'll have you know, even though I am a person who does do one of my jobs does involve tips, I gotta let everybody know that without a doubt, tip culture is not good for anybody. It's not good for a culture. In fact, yes, it is. When you do the math and you look at the trajectory hard enough, you'll notice that tip culture is absolutely destructive for sure. And it's going to take time, but after a while, it's going to create more and more of a divide. It's not a positive on society. All right. And so, for example, in other countries, like say in Europe or in Asia or damn any other countries, they don't even have tips. Like, for example, if you ever heard of India or places like this, in which you go to the market and you freaking haggle over every last thing that you buy at the market, you haggle over all of it. In a culture like that, they never ever heard of tips, and they would be outraged by the idea of tips. Okay. And so in a lot of places, it's just it never ever came up, and it causes you to wonder. I did a little research on it, but I don't think I even understand it. It does cause you to wonder who the hell invented tip culture. I don't have anything official on that question right now. Who invented tip culture? But I think I'll have you know that whoever invented tip culture, if I had to put money on it, whoever invented tip culture was like of elite status. They were like real high up, and they had so much resources that it just pleased them to flaunt their resources and throw little coins at the peasant. It had to be. Nobody in the middle class ever volunteered to pay more money than they were already paying, especially in other countries. Somehow it got like installed here in America. I would assume it's from the elite. And furthermore, I would assume it was a long term project, this tip culture, which had to be established by the elite. It had to be. There's no other way around it. It's just whether or not they established tip culture in order to be destructive or to be positive, or at least just to get what their way, tipping certain people certain amounts of money so they can get their way. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we'll never know exactly how organically tip culture came about here in America. Perhaps we'll never know. But even if we never figured it out, I do have to say, without a doubt, that it for sure is destructive. For sure is destructive. And also, we are going to talk about the invasion because we are being invaded. And it's not by, as we've established, we talked about it before, it's like 95% women and children, and just people need to be on welfare, basically. We're taking in all sort of welfare people from all over the world for some reason. Well, I know the reason. I think we all know the reason, right? So we're going to talk about that invasion thing, but right now, tip culture, and it is going to go together, by the way. Okay, so tip culture had to have been started by elites, and it could have been because they know it's a way of getting what they want. Plus, also now they're gonna like finagle that middle class. They also had to tip. Everybody has to tip. And I think it's well known, and it's not hard to figure out that in the end, the people who benefit the most from not from there being a tip culture is potentially the establishment themselves, the people who's running the restaurant, the people who's employing the other people who get tipped. The reason is because you don't have to pay that person very much. You in fact pay them very little, and still that person's going to get paid. Why? Through tips. You didn't pay them any money. They're just there working for you. You're paying them little bits of money, so it does help the employer. But that's all well known. Obviously, it does. But what I wanted to point out was this, and a lot of people might already know it, but I want to say it, this big reason why I even did this broadcast is what I wanted to point out is that tip culture, yes, it is destructive for sure. Right. The more we look into it, I think the more we'll find it's it's a sabotage for your country, right? But okay, tip culture had to have been started by the elites, right? And it could have been an attack on the middle class or an attack on poor people, or it could just be showing out or what have you. But what a lot of people don't think about is okay, tip culture, especially speaking on like food service, but this can go for anything regarding tips. Tip culture, say like in food service, what it effectively does is it causes you to be able to pay the servers of your establishment less. Okay, you don't have to pay them so much money because they're going to get money through tips, as we already said. All right, so it's because of that reason and other reasons, but especially because of that reason that you can charge less money for whatever it is, your sandwich or your steak, or whatever you're selling. You can charge less for it because if you're paying the waiter more, you're going to have to charge more for that steak. All right. It's just simple math. Like this is the way it goes. Things cost money, right? And so people, I think everybody understands that. But what I'm pointing out right here is that, okay, the establishment, they get their money. The waiter, he gets the money through the tips. The establishment is not paying him much money, the waiter, right? So they get to save money. Therefore, they're charging less for whatever food item that they're selling. Okay, it's pretty simple. Okay, let's imagine like anywhere else in Europe or whatever other countries where they don't have this tip culture. What would automatically happen is your sandwich or whatever. Say your sandwich costed $10. Okay, your sandwich automatically is going to cost like $17 now. Okay, period. So if they paid the waiter, if there was no tips, you just paid the waiter exactly what he needs to be able to pay bills in his area of town where he lives in. If that's cool. And now you're charging $17 for that sandwich. And I don't think I'm losing intelligent people on this. It's very simple. Now you're charging $17 for each sandwich. Okay, and you don't have to worry about tipping. It don't matter. It's $17 there. There's your sandwich. Oh, this person now everybody's got paid. Okay, so effectively, what it does is whoever can tip or whoever chooses to tip, be it they rich people or even if they're middle class people trying to sell out and trying to like keep up with the rich people, therefore trying to tip. What they're effectively doing, if you understand that money is liquid and that people are getting paid, that what they're effectively doing is they're paying extra money by tipping. They're paying extra money so that poor people can pay less money. It's all very simple. poor people, they can pay less money. So instead of the sandwich being $17 and there being nobody who's tipping, instead of that, the sandwich it costs $10 and you could choose whether or not to tip. And of course, the poor person, the person who's just very into themselves, they're not going to tip at all. They're going to pay $10 when legitimately they should have paid $17. They are getting cheap. They're getting subsidized food. Basically, their food is subsidized. These poor people's food is subsidized by who? Rich people and middle class people, and even poor people, other poor people who know how to tip. These poor people who ain't tipping at all their food is being subsidized, period, whether or not they admit it. So it's like there's plenty of ways in which you could say reparations have been had. Well, let me head upstairs real quick, but there's plenty of ways you could say that reparations had already been had, but even when you consider just tipping, even when you consider that poor people have had the option to not tip and pay the exact minimum to pay a price that was just artificially lowered for them specifically. When you consider how many times that's taken place in America, then you would understand that reparations have been paid back by that by itself. By people, by rich people and middle class people tipping and poor ass people not tipping, just by that alone has reparations already been paid. All right, before we get up out of here, because I'm running out of time, I wanted to get up out of the kitchen because, you know, there's people going in there and they might want a little bit of peace in there, right? So I headed upstairs. But I did want to finish off. Okay, so already it seems mathematically inevitable that people who tip are quite simply subsidizing the food for people who don't tip, right? When in fact, so now you got poor people who feel like it's their right to go out to eat. Everything's artificially lower than it should be. Why? Because they don't tip. And they feel like it's their right to, and so now they got used to going out to eat all the time, right? When in fact, in reality, their broke ass shouldn't even be going out to eat, and they should be buying all their stuff that they eat and cooking it themselves. That's what they should be doing. And if they did do that, if they did do what I'm saying, their health would probably be a lot better, right? So their choices that they're making are actually bad for their health as well, and their food is being subsidized, and they don't appreciate shit, right? Even though they're not going to acknowledge that their food is being subsidized or nothing. They don't appreciate shit. Okay, and then as people all have come to kind of figure out the invasion. Now I know establishments. There's probably endless amounts of establishments in San Antonio, for example, who they have hired not only Mexicans, but like I said, Venezuelans, Nigerians, everybody else. Like, it doesn't matter what country you come from. I'm sure that various people have been hired here, there, and everywhere. Why? Because you get to pay them a low amount of money. That's why. It's just what it is. It's like, I don't know what's to be said about it, but nobody's going to stop that. Here in San Antonio, people are going to hire Venezuelans. Why? Because it is legal, even though they are illegal. Like, I mean, they're not supposed to be here, but they are here. And then they're issued some sort of paperwork. Shout out to who's ever in the building. We're about to get up out of here, but this immigrant, this illegal immigrant, is then issued paperwork, and then they can go work for whatever amount of time for low ass wages. So they work for very low wages so that people can get very cheap food and then choose whether or not to tip, like we were saying. There's plenty of establishments doing that. so that they can pay very cheap wages. Why? Because they're barely holding on, right? And they're desperate. And so they're doing the cement. And also, I might point out Uber, let's say Uber Eats, Uber in general. What do they got? DoorDash and just all the other things. People who are working in food service, they might understand that depending on where you're at, north of 50% of people coming in doing this desperate work, and you're not going to get rich off DoorDash, right? The only way you can like get some money worth having from DoorDash is if your income is subsidized, which I have a sneaky suspicion a lot of these illegals, when they work for DoorDash or they work for this and that, their income is basically subsidized. They're kind of under the table a lot of times. And so, like, classically, people have thought of, like, say, farmers, for example, and say, oh, these farmers are hiring, like, illegals, whatnot, to pick produce and this and that. They're taking advantage. Well, they're taking advantage of these immigrants, not paying them very much. Well, at the same time, your produce is artificially low in price. That's why, and that's how. You could perhaps choose to pay more for your produce, but how many people are actually doing that? So classically, you'd blame farmers for if the whole of America should turn around right now, look at Uber Eats and DoorDash and all that, and say, "What the fuck are y'all up to, employing all these illegals and making sure that they have enough money to continue residing in America illegally? What the fuck are y'all doing?" All right, but the reason, and we got to get up out of here. The reason why the American people, ain't going to turn around and ask DoorDash is necessarily, "What are y'all doing?" Uber Eats and Uber and Lyft, and what are y'all doing? Hire these illegals. The reason why they're not going to ask is because so many people, such a percentage of America, have gotten themselves used to paying a certain amount to be ushered off to different places, to have their food delivered right to their door, or maybe to go out to a restaurant and pay the exact minimum and nothing more. If their broke ass can't afford to do it anyways, see, they're going to continue to support the businesses that obviously are implementing illegals, and therefore it's a vicious cycle. And I just want, before we get up out of here, I just want to say that in my opinion, um, like I said, this is the end, and America's going down. What that means for the rest of the world is probably not good. And we're going to see. It's all going to be very exciting if we live to see it. Is that America's going down, and if we wanted to change tip culture, if we all turn around and got some sense, and we wanted to change tip culture and not have one anymore, it's not going to happen. We're way too dug in deep. We're past the point of no return, and we're never going to change that about this country. And the country is going down. I'm not like happy to say that. I'm saying like logistically, it looks like it's going down, and the tip culture ain't helping. And in fact, it's causing poor people to be so desperate that they don't give an F that their whole country is crumbling all around them. They just are so desperate for food, and poisonous food, by the way, to make them all sick and unhealthy, brought to them is directly to their doorstep by desperate illegals. It's March the 3rd, 2020, 2024. I'll holler at y'all a little bit later.